Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Stuart Young sworn in as Trinidad and Tobago's 8th Prime Minister. Defense Force member charged with Pleasantville woman's murder. 7 arrested, firearm and drugs seized in police crackdown. And internationally, White House denies defying judge's order over deportations to El Salvador. Now for the details. Stuart Young has officially taken office as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, pledging to lead with integrity, inclusion and accountability. He was sworn in at President's House, St. Anne's on March 17th, becoming the nation's 8th Prime Minister. Young takes over from Dr. Keith Rowley, who made history as the first sitting Prime Minister to step down voluntarily before a general election. In his address, Young highlighted the country's rich cultural diversity and called for national unity to drive progress. He emphasized that Trinidad and Tobago's future depends on the collective efforts of its citizens and vowed to work towards a safer, stronger, and more prosperous nation. Also sworn in at the ceremony was former Housing Minister Camille Robinson-Regis, who now serves as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. A member of the Defense Force has been charged with the murder of a 39-year-old mother of 2 from Pleasantville. Lance Corporal Kevin Hamilton, 40, was charged over the weekend and is expected to appear before a master in the South B Criminal Court on March 17th. Hamilton has 2 addresses, one at Upper Bellow Road, Belmont, and another at 15th Street in Beetham. Cesare Kidney Ramdas of apartment 13, building C in Orchid Gardens, was shot dead in her apartment around 3:40 p.m. on January 29th by a man pretending to be a customer. She operated a parlor from her apartment on the ground floor. The police retrieved 10 spent shells at the scene. Superintendent Steve Prasad, ASP Maharaj, and Sergeant Bridget Mohan of the Homicide Bureau of Investigations, Region 3, led the investigation, and WPC Mohammed led the charge. A few days ago, a file was submitted to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions for advice, and on March 15th, the police received instructions to charge Hamilton. 7 people were arrested and a firearm, ammunition, and cannabis were seized during police operations across 3 divisions on Sunday. In the Western Division, officers conducting a state of emergency exercise discovered a rifle with a loaded magazine at Cameron Road. Meanwhile, in the Northeastern Division, police and Defense Force personnel found cannabis hidden under a derelict vehicle in 2nd Caledonia Mover. In the Southern Division, a joint police operation led to the arrest of 7 suspects aged 18 to 55 for various offenses, including drug possession, housebreaking, and breach of protection order.
Morning show.
The White House has denied an accusation from rights groups that it flouted due process by defying a judge's order while carrying out deportations at the weekend. A group of 238 alleged Venezuelan gang members plus 23 alleged members of the international MS-13 gang were sent from the U.S. to a prison in El Salvador. Some were removed from the country under a law not used since World War II. The move came despite a temporary block issued by a judge. The White House said the judge's order itself was not lawful and was issued after the group was deported. Neither the U.S. government nor El Salvador has identified the detainees or provided details of their alleged criminality or gang membership. Announcing the move on Saturday, Trump accused Tren de Aragua of perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion or predatory incursion against the territory of the United States. He invoked the Alien Enemies Act, a piece of legislation that dates to 1798, which was designed to allow non-citizens to be deported in times of war or invasion. Campaigners have questioned Trump's justification. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.   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  WESN.    WESN.    WESN.    WESN.    WESN.    WESN.    WESN.    WESN.
WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. WESN. W
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
It's because I'm moving, my camera automatically moves to get me sensitive free.
Nelson Mandela has a quote that says, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And I wonder to what extent do our leaders in Trinidad and Tobago use and abuse such a notion, such a method. Or perhaps maybe they don't fully understand it. The political language that we have in our country bothers me sometimes, and it makes me worried, in part because our society is becoming more violent. More aggressive rhetoric might open a door that we will have a hard time shutting, that we will never fully consider the possibility of it ever being opened, and then the consequences is essentially things that we would never want to go through. As remote the possibility might be, if to even touch on your risk, it is something that gives me pause and is of great concern. But we're in a democracy, and to some extent, it has to be tempered, the sentiments that I just said, with another quote. Freedom of speech should be wide open, as long as it doesn't incite violence. This is Talking Point on WESN. Sean Michael Small joining you once again. However, we are joined by someone at the top of the show. And I am glad to allow me to reintroduce my co-host, the one and only Mr. Keaton Shah.
Good morning, Sean Michael Small, and good morning to all viewers of Talking Point. It's a pleasure to be here.
Keaton, one of the things that all of the hoopla that is going on, because to some extent, we had a slightly unprecedented moment in our history happen over the course of the weekend into yesterday morning. But one of the things that I've been talking about on this situation, and we'll get into the official government stuff, but the political side with regards to the PNM, it seems as though Stuart Young's position as the de facto leader on the campaign, but he's not actually a political leader. And this is just one of those things where I understand that it's not necessarily illegal, and I'm not going to go too far with certain sentiments, but it would be better off in an idealistic world for the internal election process to happen before the election and for him to be selected by the membership, as opposed to having that happen after the fact, in which case, Keaton, I have to ask, would you feel as though we're voting for a man who technically, has not gone through the process and could potentially be replaced, and we get a bait and switch? Not that it would happen.
To be honest with you, the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, late on Sunday night posted to his social media account that it is his intention to consult with the executive leadership of the People's National Movement and resign as political leader from the People's National Movement at the nearest possibility. So Dr. Keith Rowley has indicated that he plans to actually step down from political leadership of the People's National Movement as well. So he's going the full 100 yards as it relates to his leadership roles and capacities. Interestingly, he's still a member of Parliament for Diego Martin West, so he sees out that tenure until whenever the election date is called. But in respect to Stuart Young leading the People's National Movement, we don't know when the election date is. In fact, reporters asked him yesterday if he can give an idea as per when it is, whether it would be beyond April. And he indicated that anything is possible. And I think with a new cabinet, with reshuffle, though, it signals a number of different things. It also suggests that there's going to be some time before the general election is called. And it gives the opportunity for Stuart Young to actually contest the leadership elections of the People's National Movement when Dr. Keith Rowley steps down. So there is going to be leadership elections before the next general election.
I mean,
and so
before
it will give people the opportunity to vote for a man who has not only served as Prime Minister, but who will also be quite possibly the political leader of the People's National Movement.
Hold off on the cabinet stuff until we get to the review. I just want to get to this last point there. I believe it came out maybe from now Prime Minister Young, or then before he was Prime Minister Young, maybe at the rally on Sunday, that the internal elections would be in September. Do you think that the general election will be after September?
I don't think the general election will be after September, because I think that one of the biggest mandates of any incoming government would be the budget presentation and the budget presentation for financial year 2025-2026. So I don't believe that we'll have general elections so close or just before the budget is due to be read, before the financial year actually comes to an end. I think it'll be before that. So even though he indicated that on during the rally, which I believe took place on Sunday, the Prime Minister later went to his social media account to indicate that he plans to resign. So you see, the thing is, as the Prime Minister resigns, and this is with consultation with the executive, the rest of the executive of the PNM, once he resigns, a leadership election should be called. Now, I know that you have deputy political leaders, my apologies, for instances such as this. However, it is expected, and there should be an internal election to elect a new political leader upon the resignation of Dr. Keith Rowley.
Who are the deputy political leaders in the PNM?
I believe Stuart Young is a deputy political leader. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Colm Imbridge is a deputy political leader as well. The rest slipped me from the top. I believe there are 3 political leaders.
Is it Camille?
Deputy political leaders. So I get that information and share it with you.
Well, so the reason why I say that is apparently the Congress of the People has had an interim political leader ever since the last election they contested in any significant way, which was 2 elections ago. So potentially, interim political leader into the election is not outside the realm of possibilities. Let's just put it that way. So this will be something interesting to follow, because this is my bone of contention in every situation, is this part of it here. And ultimately, Keaton, I can't agree with you on this one. Assuming that what they said is true and they're not going to walk back from it, if the internal elections of the PNM is in September, and you have pointed out practical reasons why they might not push the national elections right after the budget that would be read this year, it would potentially be before the PNM internal elections, and then that scenario, I think, is more likely to play out. The Prime Minister said as soon as possible. He didn't actually say that could, as soon as possible, could even be next year if necessary. So
let me just correct myself. Stuart Young is the chairman. I was mistaking the role of Foster Cummings and Stuart Young there, because Foster Cummings is the general secretary. But you've got Dr. Keith Lawley as political leader, Camille Robinson Regis as lady vice chair, Dr. Nyan Lawley as vice chairman. So that's currently as it stands.
They don't. Is there a formal deputy political leader?
So I'm just correcting myself there.
Okay, all right. Well, look, we've been on this long enough, but there's actually some serious meat on the matter to get to. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll go into today's Daily Review.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of at a stalemate.
You'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
But I think upon completion of the internal election, because you have to recall that is something that happened in 2010.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1, find the style number on the tag.
She pushed.
Step 2, match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag.
To which she did and then lost.
Step 3, search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
And we're back here on Talking Points, and we're kicking off with today's Daily Review. And it's been quite a while. We're doing it with Keaton Shaw joining me via Zoom here on Talking Points. Hey, he's actually, for the first time in a while, really earning that co-host credit, Keaton? Now,
I've got to work for it now. I really got to work for it.
Top story, of course, Minister of Energy Stuart Young. He has been sworn in as Prime Minister, and I did not listen to his speech. I was still recovering from a lack of sleep, but reading some of it, ironically, Keaton, just to start off with the man himself, one of the things that I thought about over the weekend is the fact that I don't know if we have, when they speak about the American president as being presidential, I don't know if if our leaders have too many moments where we could say they're prime ministerial. But just kind of reading some of the quotes of his speech and the language choices that he made, they are not par for the course for the local political landscape. This, of course, is a more formal setting. How the rhetoric was being used in the rally, that kind of communication, it's not really my cup of tea. What are your thoughts on when Stuart Young says things like, I will lead with integrity, inclusion, and accountability. We will harness our unique strengths, diversity, and aspirations to build a future where every citizen has the opportunity to thrive?
I think those are sentiments that you would expect of a newly sworn-in Prime Minister to actually make in their inaugural speech. It's something that you would hope to see and hope to expect from an inaugural Prime Minister, but words are very much cheaper than actions. And of course, time will tell, whatever time there is left for Stuart Young as Prime Minister to act upon such words that he has presented. Albeit, I think they are quite noble things. I think they are good things. I think what was most interesting to me, and need I say what was rather commendable, was in respect to Young publicly stating that he's open to working with the opposition. And he said, and I quote, I asked the opposition and the leader of the opposition to join with me to build a better Trinidad and Tobago, that as much as I can do, and I asked that with clean hands and a clean heart, it is up to the leader of the opposition. The quote continues, but I thought that was quite noble on his part as well. And quite frankly, these are things I hope to see in any political leader. But as I said, it's his first 24 hours. It hasn't been a complete 24 hours as yet. So we have to give him time to see whether or not he actually acts upon the words that he has stated in his inaugural speech.
Yeah, because I can't remember what all of them were, but he's made a couple of, for lack of a better word, campaign promises. He said he might look into education, and I can't remember what the other three things were, but these were, I think,
definitely at education, definitely at women's rights.
Women's rights.
Also spoken about culture as well.
Oh, did he also speak about diversification? I can't remember. But these are things like culture, women's rights, education. Well, the syllabus, to look at it in that way, these are things that perhaps are more like left on the back burner issues when push comes to shove with how our politics goes. And one of the things I'm wondering is, are these just empty promises? Will he actually make the attempt? Are the promises even practical? I'm not too sure. And I do wonder, it's similar to Kamala Harris. Technically, he's making campaign promises as the expected interim prime minister for at least a few months. Some of these things you could potentially start looking into, or rather, why haven't you were part of the last administration for the last 10 years? Why didn't administration touch it?
Why are you referring to him as interim prime minister?
That's a good point. Yes, he is prime. Well, yes. It's just one of those weird things where technically he was not elected, and this term is, this period of office is only going to be a few months. So, but you're right. Legally speaking, he is prime minister. Interim there's no legal standing there. But he's offering things for his candidacy. But I dare ask, why didn't they do it in the last 10 years? Any one of those things, to touch on it? I don't know. Is it fair? He was working on someone else's agenda until now.
He was working under someone else's agenda, but he was a key part of that agenda. He was seen as a key man leading such agenda. He was part of government and leading government's agenda. Of course, as you mentioned, it was spearheaded by Dr. Keith Rowling, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, these are words that you would expect to hear from a prime minister in the inaugural speech, and these are words that you would hope to hear from a prime minister throughout the years of their leadership reign in the capacity as prime minister. But it's quite a good question. Why weren't these things that were done before? Why is this something that is only being stated now? Again, would you have expected otherwise? Would you have expected him to state otherwise? The thing that Stuart Young has a challenge of doing now before the elections are called, and as you would have pointed out, he was under the guidance of a leader before him. He now has to separate himself from the leadership of Dr. Keith Rowley, and he now has to forge his own path. He now has to forge his own brand as Prime Minister and as leader of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a challenge because of the baggage that is tied to Stuart Young. But that being said, why not give him a chance? We don't have much of a choice at this point anyway.
Well, speaking of expectations, there were reports in the press yesterday. Marvin Gonzalez will be Minister of National Security. The former PS will be the new Minister of Finance. Colin Burt will be Minister of Public Utilities. All of these things came to pass. We'll get to them, but technically I wanted to start with, probably the bombshell, at least for some, because it was reported Keith Scotland was up to be Attorney General. And when it came time to see who was actually going to be sworn in, it was Camille Robinson Regis. She is now the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. It is quite a departure from her predecessors, and I will just say this, Keaton, to start. At the very least, she is someone with more political experience and with more political smarts, I guess I could say, than her predecessors. No offense, I am not saying Reginald Moore is not an intelligent man. He just was not a politician, and I think to some extent you saw the downfalls with regards to how he handled the job and such a public role.
I don't know if I can agree with you when you say political smarts. I think you're going to have to be a bit more clarified in that particular position.
The bar from her two predecessors, Keaton, has not been technically set high, right? So, we're not asking her to break records with the high jump here. So, but to some extent,
what I appreciated, Sean, what I did appreciate about Reginald Moore was that it's something that you said was a bit of a downfall of his own, which I thought actually could have worked out to his benefit, which is seeming not to be caught up in the politics. And as much as he was a PNM appointed Attorney General, because not being caught up in politics, you would have expected a better of him. Now, I'm not saying that he was a bad Attorney General, but there certainly was a lot that was pinned against him.
Keaton.
And whether or not that is him getting caught up in the politics or not, or having to clean up others' messes, then that's an entire different debate.
Keaton, you're being
of Camille Robinson Regis.
Keaton, you're being a little too kind.
Go on.
Please try to tell me how. Listen, there were two people in that Auditor General situation, right, that made it into a mess. Right, and to some extent, we have to wonder if Colin Burt was actually taking too much of Reginald Moore's advice. I don't know, right? Because the way how he handled it from his end, it gave us separate questions independent to the questions we would have for Colin Burt. So, to some extent now, that is an example to me where he kind of dived into the politics, and this is Reginald Moore, in the most unfortunate way, because I can't see on a matter of principle, he took the stances that he did over the Auditor General matter.
And that's the thing. This is where it indicated it's not being involved in politics or not seeming to be political should have been to his benefit. But the moment that you have to get involved in the political aspect of your job, it's always going to be tricky. In the instance of Camille Robinson Regis, first, congratulations on her appointment. But I have to be honest with you, I was quite surprised. I was quite taken aback. It's something that I was not expecting. And I think many would have also been quite surprised. The thing for me is, yes, you're right. She has the political experience. And at this time, in respect to maneuvering certain things, she should have the political experience, having been in active politics for a number of decades. But that also is a bit of a con for me when you take a look at this appointment. She would be versed with certain aspects of the law, having been a minister and also having been, of course, a member of parliament. So I would expect that she would have some understanding of the law. But having not been a practicing attorney for a number of years, that is a bit of a strange appointment to me. Again, I could be wrong, and hence why I say congratulations on her appointment as Attorney General, but it's quite baffling to me. Even Marvin Gonzalez was an active attorney at law in the Ministry of Works and Transport before he was appointed as a member of, well, selected to run as a member of parliament, elected, and subsequently became a minister. So he was a practicing attorney at law, and so to me, it's a bit strange. It is rather odd, but I'm trying to figure out the strategy behind it. Maybe she has been put there to try and politically maneuver all that has happened prior to her appointment, leading up to a general election. That's all I can think of.
Well, here's the thing. To some extent, being a private practicing attorney probably is not the best preparation to be Attorney General. Case in point, Mr. Reginald Amor, I found you kind of saw his background of being a private attorney and how he would deal with situations as though he's seeking his client's interests and not fully understanding the role of Attorney General is not just the attorney for cabinet, but also the attorney for the state, and the state also includes other public officials as well as the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And it seems like he was not able to understand all of those sub-roles within that role. Something that Karen and I have touched on a little bit. That
Just
the UK
bear
made.
in mind that in making that statement, you're also, it's not just Reginald Moore who's a private practicing attorney at law prior to their appointment. There were a number of attorney generals before their appointment who were private practicing attorney at laws. And of course, the attorney general will always have some controversy surrounding them
the point
and
is,
their time in office. But just bear that in mind as well.
The thing is, though, they tried that. They tried the highly respected, non-political, experienced attorney. It didn't work out. So to some extent, maybe this is an overreaction. We're going for someone with actual political experience. So when they deal with the public, they would have a better idea with regards to what they're doing. And also, I do wonder if experience as an attorney in private practice might be in some ways overblown as to how much it's necessary, as opposed to just having a proper understanding of your role and what your approach should be, because how you approach a case, a civil case, even a criminal case, is very different to how you would approach matters of the state. So it's not ideal, because not being a practicing attorney, to some extent, yes, she will be out of touch with certain aspects of the law, but the flip side is, as you pointed out, being a parliamentarian, there are other aspects of the law more central to the role of Attorney General that she should at least be familiar with. But before we go into some of the other appointments, I wanted to touch on this point. Adrian Leonce is now the Minister of Housing. He is not up for re-election. We don't know. He may end up being a senator at some point for the Stuart Young administration. But he is a minister, and I guess to some extent maybe he is basically in a caretaker role unless we hear otherwise. And it makes me think, among other things, like Minister Young not looking in the immediate term to give someone else the portfolio of energy, and rightfully so. I believe that his logic is sound for the immediate to short term. So it makes me think that these appointments are not necessarily what the government would look like moving forward. If the PNM wins the election and Stuart Young has to form a cabinet, it makes me think, Keaton, perhaps these are just interim appointments to tithe or to hold the government over until they have a more proper mandate, I guess you could say. So I don't know if some of these appointments might be long-term, and some of these might not, and I guess we're left to see. What would you think about that? I mean, potentially then it means that Camille is not necessarily the long-term AG. Obviously, Adrian Leonce is probably not going to be the long-term Minister of Housing, and et cetera, et cetera. Not that she can't be. If they win the election, she just might be.
Well, that's the thing. Sure, we find ourselves in quite a tricky position, because the elections are expected to be held, and I believe that there is until the end of November for the elections to actually be held constitutionally. I think that's what it states. So you're making the argument that they're not going to be long-term, that they're interim appointments. At this point, they are the leaders of their respective ministries. They are ministers of their respective ministries. We can't say that they're interim. If you are using that in the context that it's short-term, well, yeah, you can say that they're short-term appointments. The general election will then decide who's leading, who's going to form the next cabinet, and of course the next government of Trinidad and Tobago. But I think also that Stuart Young, to a certain extent, had to stamp his authority, and he also had to show some action, or his first actions as Prime Minister. And bearing in mind that there are internal party politics and whatever that may be, he would also want to put individuals in certain positions whom he think is best suited for the roles, or at this time, who can carry out the roles and functions, the responsibilities as is necessary for the general election. So all this is him making those leadership decisions and stamping his prime ministerial approval on all of them. He has to show that he is doing something, and this is the first step. Quite a number of the appointments are rather surprising, but can be deemed as positive. I don't think we even touched on Colm Imbert not being the Minister of Finance. And if he's not the Minister of Finance now, don't expect him to be Minister of Finance should the PNM win the next election. That should be a positive. Thing is, Vishnu Danpal now has quite a difficult task ahead of him. But to be honest with you, Sean, I think his first move as Minister of Finance in welcoming the media, in sharing his contact number with the media, in shaking hands with the media, is a 360 as compared to Colm Imbert before. Colm Imbert had a reputation for blocking members of the media, for barring them, for not having any communication with them. So that in itself is a good thing. Putting Stuart Young in charge of public utilities in the midst of these transformation plans is quite a bit of an odd move. But removing Fitzgerald Hines as Minister of National Security could be seen as a positive. Who else would you have put there? That's always the tricky thing. Who else are you going to put in that position? I guess Marvin Gonzalez was seen as the best alternative.
Hold on here. We can't just lightly touch on all of them. We have to go in depth.
No, we're going into them. I'm just introducing them. We can go into all of them.
So let's go back to the current Minister of Finance, image courtesy of Newsday. Just want to get that out there. Vishnu Danpal. He is a former permanent secretary, and there's more to this, but the long and short is he said something interesting. This is one of the headlines. I think both two of the daily newspapers, including Newsday, carried this as one of their stories. He promises not to introduce austerity measures. Now, the trick is, I guess, Keaton, you would think he was the High Commissioner to Germany, if I'm not correct. He's been recalled to do this.
The United Kingdom.
United Kingdom, sorry. So one would think this would be very odd for a short-term appointment. Not that it's impossible for it to be, but you're making a move like this potentially for the future. Now, I won't necessarily get into all the criticisms just yet, but also, Minister Gonzalez also had similar sentiments as the Minister of National Security, where he said he will prioritize corruption and clean up within the TTPS. Again, these are speaking to a long-term agenda. With regards to these two appointments, let's start off with these two appointments. We have Minister Gonzalez up. Let's start with him. First of all, I would have thought, given that he has acted as AG, that, and like you said, he's had recent experience as a practicing attorney. I would have thought, given no context, he may have been the most obvious choice to be given the post of Attorney General. But perhaps, Keaton, this is a case where, yes, he might be good in that role, but the overall combinations, this might work out better. Would you agree that that might be the situation here? Or perhaps, as a working minister, you need someone like that in the portfolio of national security right now?
All right, a couple of things. I think one of the things that you would have pointed out was the political maturity of Camille Robinson Regis. And I use maturity. Maturity has a number of definitions, but I use it quite lightly. The political maturity of Camille Robinson Regis may have been one of the deciding factors in respect to Marvin Gonzalez not being given that appointment. Bearing in mind that Marvin Gonzalez has been in this position for the last 5 years. So understand in that regard, this is quite perhaps where the decision was made. But you also removing Fitzgerald Hines as Minister of National Security is quite a popular move. I'm
well, it's
not
low
gonna
hanging
mince my
fruit.
words. It is going to be a popular move,
It's,
removing him as Minister of National
yeah.
Security. Right?
It's the obvious
that in itself is a good thing.
No, but I was going
Right.
to say it's the obvious move, Keaton. Like, I understand it's a good thing, but I guess the question always was who's going to replace him. I'll say this: Minister Gonzalez as Minister of Public Utilities, I found showed better leadership and communication skills than many of his peers. Do you think, to some extent, that could be the reason we need someone that could handle communicating national security stuff is tricky? I mean, basically, that's where Fitzgerald Hines fell flat more than anything else. He doesn't lead the police per se.
I think Fitzgerald Hines just fell flat. I think he just fell flat. You know, I honestly, I just think, again, very nice person, very nice guy, just seems to be quite clueless as a politician. But, you know, yeah, thank you for your service.
No.
I would say. But in respect to Marvin Gonzalez's appointment, I would agree with you. Politically, he seems to be a bit more savvy in respect to his communication, and that is very, very important. Now, it is not the only, it is not the only criteria or quality that is essential, integral to the role of any government minister, but in this particular case, Minister of National Security. So he's going to have to prove himself a lot more. He's gotten quite a mammoth task on his hands, because he also takes over during a state of emergency. We are still under a state of emergency, so
with an acting commissioner of police
leading under this particular state of emergency. Though he has Keith Scotland, who was there prior to his appointment, who would hopefully bringing up to par. Marvin Gonzalez has a very, very tricky road ahead. You see, the thing is, you also have to wonder whether or not Marvin Gonzalez, it's certainly not a demotion from public utilities, of course, but he was supposed to be spearheading the transformation of the Water and Sewerage Authority. He's also supposed to be spearheading the transformation of other state utilities, and even leading in respect to public utilities and the rate, public utility rates. Well, I could tell you, Colin Members is now Minister of Public Utilities, so expect rates to go up. You know, just expect rates to go up, and I don't know what's going to happen with the transformation of these utilities, but it's underway. It's now Colin Members leading that particular portfolio. In respect to Marvin Gonzalez, sure, I think we have to be quite fair and honest. Anyone you put in the position of Minister of National Security is going to face great scrutiny.
Yeah,
they are going to be anyone you put there. You can put anyone in that position, and irregardless of who they are, who their name is, or their experience, they will always face criticisms. They will always face scrutiny. So it's not an easy position. We know that it's not an easy job at all. But let's see how Marvin Gonzalez fares. He may do better. We don't know. We certainly should give him the opportunity to perform, given that the state of emergency and the regulations under the state of emergency are still very much in play. So we might be surprised, or it might just be another disappointment.
Now, I'll say this. I don't necessarily think that Colin would raise utility rates. However, given what Mariano Brown, the one point of praise he had for Colin as Minister of Finance, to some extent, Keaton, I can't dismiss that sentiment completely. And in fact, I even go further and say perhaps that's why he was put as Minister of Public Utilities.
Yeah,
he seems to be the guy to do
from a humorous perspective.
No,
but
think about it. He seems to be the guy that's we have the unpopular economic decision. Let Com do it. Right, so maybe that's why he's there. Who knows? Because no one else wants to do it, so he'll do it. Now, with that said, though, I'll say this, and let's not name names, right? Let's not name names, because there's more than one name, and there's many ways you could unpack this. But generally speaking, now Prime Minister Stuart Young said there were no demotions. Do you think that is the case? Because, yes, there are ways to spin it where none of these appointments are demotions. There are ways to spin it where many of these appointments are demotions, whether who's no longer minister or what have you, right? So what do you think about
that? Mr. Hines being removed as Minister of National Security could be seen as a demotion. He's now minister in the office of the Prime Minister, so he retains the portfolio which he had previously. But I think it's a good move, removing Fitzgerald as Minister of National Security. He only had, I mean, he's not going back up for the election, so he's out of it anyway. But again, short-term solution to a long-term problem is putting Marvin Gonzalez there. And short-term by no choice because the general elections are due. Interestingly, I wonder if Stuart Young has made the decisions that the Prime Minister before him could not make. I don't know whether it was because
That's
of
a good way to put it.
will. I don't know if it was because of strategy, but he has made some appointments, he's made some adjustments of which Dr. Keith Rowley simply could not make for whatever the reason. He's also made adjustments that obviously would place people in positions that align with his vision, that align with his plans and his particular mandate. He's put people in positions whom he trusts to actually lead in those responsibilities. So, of course, it can be seen as a demotion. Of course, it could be seen as individuals not having or wielding the authority or the power that they had previously. I mean, the Big Five is always going to be education, health, national security. Those are three of the Big Five. They're always going to play particularly magnanimous roles going forward. Having removed Fitzgerald Hines, having shifted around Marvin Gonzalez, Khalil Robinson reduced as the Attorney General, I think those are moves that really, though short-term, as you made the argument because of the elections, could be quite effective. I think Vishnu Danpal is an interesting move overall. And he has faced some criticisms from the opposition.
Well,
in fact, I think everyone has faced criticisms from the opposition. But Vishnu Danpal's appointment is quite an interesting one. It's something I actually agree with.
Hold on.
It is something that I agree with, appointing Vishnu Danpal.
Let's transition.
Yes, my co-host.
Let's transition to the next topic because it goes into the criticisms. I wanted to save Minister Danpal for this moment because going into topic 2, of course, we get essentially Kamala's response. And Keaton, we have reached a point now where I have a very negative reaction to this because usually I do not like the opposition's communication because I find, it's not necessarily efficient, it's not effective, it's just not good for the role as opposition. But now I think they've gone a step further down a negative direction. Basically, Kamala, democracy is lost in a bloodless coup. And I have the same headline twice on my rundown, I'm sorry. And also she criticized the cabinet basically saying, it's the same old, right? Keaton, first of all, with what she said there about a bloodless coup, the reason why I find that to be overboard is that given the current state of our crime situation and the willingness of some people to go to violence, I have concerns that the language is maybe a little too strong. First of all, how does a government usurp itself? That's what I would like to know. That's point number one. Point number two, didn't the government essentially utilize the mechanisms that the law outlines is the process to handle a situation like this? It's one thing if the PNM, took over the government from another party, but it's an internal situation. This is how Parliament functions. This is how the majority in the House selects the Prime Minister. This is not that complicated. But the fact that she's using, I want to say extreme language, that maybe makes it sound worse than it is, but to some extent it is. Language that is unnecessarily to the extreme on this situation. All it does is incite people to say, oh my gosh, what is this? When the fact of the matter is, Keaton, this is well within the boundaries, if not the only actual legal way to conduct this situation, the transition from one prime minister to the next.
Sean, I started off my conversation this morning when you asked about Stuart Young's inaugural speech. I said I would not have expected him to say anything else. Those sentiments I expressed when responding to the opposition leader's comments. I would not have expected anything else from her part. Now, in respect to the legality of what has transpired, the opposition leader has threatened to go to court. No problem. Go to court. You have every right as a citizen, and you have every right as an opposition leader to exercise such legal rights. Go ahead. You have your attorney, whomever is advising you,
Do you really think?
let you know about your case and move forward with it.
Do you really think she's going to move forward with it? Because it seems as though yesterday she was pumping the brakes.
To move forward with it. She has made arguments about moving forward with it. Go ahead. Go right ahead with it. And prove your point in a court of law. I didn't expect anything different. Listen, the comments from the opposition leader by no means did not surprise me. Not at all. I don't know why we're acting as though this is something that is unexpected or new, or you would have hoped for otherwise.
It's not, okay, right, that's fair, but I think this, because at the end of the day, Keaton, and I have been saying something to this effect maybe for the last 3 to 4 years, at some point the rhetoric is going to go too far. It's going to encourage the wrong type of people to do the kind of thing that we never thought we would see in TNT. I mean, basically, when you tell people who are already, passionate about politics and the direction of the country, oh my gosh, it's a bloodless coup, they're taking over the country, it's illegal, it's blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, obviously, she's being hyperbolic, but not everybody who hears her is going to take it that way. Some people might potentially take it literally. And to some extent, I do wonder if she's taking advantage of the people who will take it literally.
But Sean, that's the power of any politician, to hold on to any ignorance that it is in society and exploit such ignorance. That is the power and the influence of politicians. Understand that. Ignorance is bliss when it comes to a politician's perspective. And in this particular case, the opposition leader. So again, I see you have been making the arguments. You are threatening to take legal action. Take the legal action.
If she doesn't.
If you are standing by this point and stand up in a court of law and make your arguments.
If she doesn't, what does that say to her point? If she doesn't, I think she's just trying to backtrack from it.
Once again, shows that it's hot air, as far as I'm concerned. It's hot air. Now, where I would agree to a certain extent with her comments is when she indicated that it's not necessarily a new cabinet.
Right.
Right. And to a certain extent, I would agree with her. I would go back to 2010 and 2015 and point out the number of cabinet reshuffles that took place, and also pointed out the fact that we had the biggest cabinet that existed in our history when it came to political appointments, and that was under Cabinet Pasabi. I think we even had a Minister of Water Resources in Ganga Singh at one point in time. I'm not seeing in any way at all this 2010 to 2015 equate to the time that we're living in right now. But so I would agree to a certain extent it's not a new cabinet. But again, at this time, Stuart Young has to stamp his authority and put those in positions of whom he trusts, right? And to go and have, at this time, any firings of significant quantity is not going to bode well for them politically, as a general election is right around the corner. So you would not have expected that happening. But in respect to the opposition leader, what I found, and it's contrasting to what Stuart Young said in his inaugural speech, where he extended a working hand to the opposition. The opposition leader went on to say that Vishnu Danpal was not competent. He went on to say Vishnu Danpal was incompetent. Vishnu Danpal worked under your government. Vishnu Danpal was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance under your government. Vishnu Danpal is the individual who has been running the Ministry of Finance for a number of years, right? He has been running the Ministry of Finance for a number of years. The Minister of Finance leads in respect to policy and leads in respect to government agenda. But in terms of the actual running of the ministry, Vishnu Danpal was that individual. That's why I think that this appointment in particular is quite interesting. I need to say, to a certain extent, quite exciting. And I'm very intrigued to see what Vishnu Danpal comes with. But to say that the individual was incompetent, again, he led the Ministry of Finance when you were Prime Minister.
Keaton, let me get you with the quote.
2 or 3 different ministers of finance. He was there as well.
Keaton, let me hit you with the quote.
That particular role. So
let me hit you with the quote. The quote is, he was the PS for Imbit for years as Minister of Finance. This is in today's Newsday. It's Danpal's advice to Imbit that has the country in economic ruin. He can't salvage the mess because he made it. They have actually managed to replace Imbit with someone worse. That is very, very, very funny given the fact that, yes, she is basically comparing, she's basically saying that about a Permanent Secretary that works under her. In fact, Guy Griffith came out and basically said very much the opposite, that he was forced to do a lot of work on damage control, which I think goes back to what you were saying. The minister, yes, he sets the policy and he leads the government agenda, but the permanent secretary is the one that actually has to lead the ministry, do the day-to-day operations, figure out some of the nuts and bolts of how we get things done. And again, photo courtesy of the Newsday. I agree with you. Like, this is a technocrat. To some extent, though, I fear maybe he might be similar to the Attorney General, but perhaps his role as a minister might not necessarily need him to have the same kind of relationship with the public that the Attorney General would have, and it wouldn't have the same type of challenges, because the role of an Attorney General in the Westminster system is a very weird one. The UK had to adjust their own position of Attorney General and take it out from the cabinet some time ago. So I have hope for this appointment as a technocrat as opposed to a political operator, because this is a very technical field. This is one of the few fields where you could say it might be best to have someone with intricate knowledge of how this works, because it's that important and that complex.
I honestly think so. Vishnu Danpal, it's quite refreshing. That may change is his first interactions with the media as compared to Colin Imbert, and I think that's quite important. But as I said, that may change. You never know. But for me, again, as I did it earlier with Christopher, look at what happened there. But I've always indicated you give these individuals a chance, an opportunity. There isn't a lot of time. So Vishnu Danpal has not much of a time to clean up whatever mess that he's been left with following Colin Imbert's tenure as Minister of Finance. So it's very tricky. It's very stressful the next couple of months ahead. But at the same time, I still think it is promising. Again, I could be wrong, but I think Vishnu Danpal's appointment is good on the part of Stuart Young as Minister of Finance.
One of the other daily newspapers has a quote. Of course, the headline is, he's not going to introduce austerity measures, no need to feel pain. But then the quote goes on to say, you have to make tough decisions as Minister of Finance. And there's a part of me that wonders, Keaton, do you think, one, how likely do you think he could keep to that promise of not having austerity measures, not having the population feel pain, given the fact that energy is not probably going to save us in the next 2 years, right? So unless he's a true magician, he might be backed into a corner where we may have no choice. Similar with the fuel subsidy. I wouldn't say that the fuel subsidy being decreased was unnecessary. I understand the position where we're in. Some of these decisions, it's not whether we want to do it or not, it's to what degree we have to do it.
You see, you have to bear in mind, Sean, that for a number of years, it's not the energy sector that's propped up our economy. It's the manufacturing sector. It's non-energy manufacturing that's propped up the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. That's one of the reasons why we have actually a shortage of foreign exchange, as we are all very much aware. So in relation to austerity measures, again, that could be seen as political. An example of austerity is actually a cut to public expenditure, particularly financing for social programs and social development programs. With an election right around the corner, you can expect that not to happen at all. If anything, sometimes you see an increase in public spending and expenditure on social programs. So Vishnu Danpal indicating that he's not going to implicate any harsh austerity measures on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Good luck to him. I'd love to see him navigate this. But then and again, bearing in mind that there is a general election that is expected right around the corner, not surprising that he would say that.
Have we ever had a new Minister of Finance having to give the mid-year budget review of a previous minister's budget?
Not to my recollection. But bearing in mind, as though I have a lot of grey hairs, I'm still quite young, so I could be wrong. I could be
like the only time I can think of is maybe the partnership.
That happening.
But we'll close with something that we've spoken about before. But you know, we had a second NACTA poll, and the sentiment seemingly, while not necessarily growing, it's cemented itself right now in the national conversation. The PNM has made a change. Their long-term political leader of the last 10 years, who has been a stalwart with regards to their politics and their cabinet, and one of their representatives in the House has retired. And Stuart Young, who is relatively new to the scene, he is now essentially in charge. The UNC has not made anything close to a similar change. And, you know, a second NACTA poll a couple of weeks ago reaffirmed the findings of the first one, where it seems like the public is saying, hey, this is change we rather, as opposed to just swapping out the old political leader of the PNM for the old political leader of the UNC. And do you think that, you know, the PNM seemingly has the advantage over the UNC because of this? Because here's the thing, I actually found myself yesterday morning thinking, look, we could criticize Dr. Heath Rowley all we want, but he offered a certain amount of stability, and not everything he did was bad, right? There are a lot of things that I would love to get answers for that I probably will never get answers for. Stuart Young might give us, at the very least, something similar to that, or maybe better, and perhaps that might be enough to say, hey, do we really want change for the sake of change and risk someone worse? Not saying that they are, but name me one other political leader of any other party contesting the election that you think the country will have confidence in over Stuart Young. I'm not saying Stuart Young is going to be the best prime minister we ever had. I'm just saying, based on the field, he's ahead of the pack right now. And
yes, and guess what? That could also be to the advantage of the United National Congress if they maneuver things accordingly. Yeah, understand one thing. With the United National Congress, it's quite impatient in respect to not knowing their entire slate ahead of the elections, but they seem to be biding on time. They seem to be wanting to wait as for what is happening in respect to this particular government. Stuart Young is now Prime Minister, so they're probably wanting to see all that is happening first before deciding on who are the individuals that are best to lead the campaign in a general election. Not necessarily who are the best individuals to represent an area, but probably the best individuals who can win us a general election. So the United National Congress still has time. Now, as disappointing as the rhetoric has been, that can change. So not completely ruling out the UNC as yet. You cannot rule out the United National Congress as yet. I say that this is to their advantage, and as much as the PM has gone ahead and announcing their candidates and having their rally in announcing their candidates, and the big televised rally that is, the United National Congress could use this to their advantage. Are they smart enough? Do they have the political intelligence to do that? I'm not going to count them out. I just hope, well, I'm not going to hold my breath either to it, because I could be disappointed as I've been on previous occasions.
I mean, like I said, Keaton, the opposition leader has a very interesting stance on the situation. I would like to know how a government usurps itself. So we have callers waiting. I really want to take a break too. Can we take a break? I know we don't necessarily want to call, but I think we need to take a break, guys. Okay, we'll take a break. Digger Martin, if you could hold on the line for us. When we come back, we'll take your call immediately. Stay tuned. This is Talking about the WESN. We'll be right back after this.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventists,
where good private health care is affordable.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Connect after show, Michael Small, joined by Mr. Keaton Shaw, and we have our first caller for the morning. Just a reminder, when you're on air, on the phone with us, please don't try to follow the conversation on the TV. There's a delay. It will be confusing, so mute your television. With that said, we have Diego Martin on the line. Sorry for the wait, Mr. Diego Martin, but good morning. You are on the air.
I am humble and apologies accepted. Good morning, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Small.
Good morning.
I want to talk about due diligence and how we choose people. And I'm going back to the new finance minister. What he was before? He was the High Commissioner to London.
Oh.
And that's the UK. That's where the Privy Council was. So if he was doing his job, wouldn't he get a sniff that they coming to pull the visa from Trinidad? Or was he on a holiday? You understand what I'm saying? The excuses that the foreign minister, Avery Brown, they say, and the prime minister is not surprised. If that gentleman was doing his job and he was intermingled and he's going to the cocktail parties and eating ham, lamb, and jam, somebody that whispered him, "What are you doing down there? We want to do this." That is what a commissioner job to do, to mingle with the hierarchy of another government in social settings, so you soften up the impact. And you bringing him back now to be in the Ministry of Finance, and that is how we perform. You bringing him back to basically mitigate the Attorney Auditor General 2023 and 2020 report. That is one issue. And now I'm going to jump that to, again, how we choose people in the judiciary system. We have a number of issues with court judgment taking too long. The Presbyterian thing with Justice, I won't call his name. As soon as it went to the newspaper, he gave a judgment, they're going to appeal it. I am asking, how come the Eastern Caribbean could possibly appoint? I'm not saying they didn't do due diligence, but I will question their due diligence. And I'm going to basically link that to the court system in Jamaica when they didn't know if 33 is not in Jamaica, in Ghana, when they didn't know 33 is the majority of 65, and it went, that the election petition issue. So what I'm saying, the whole apparatus of appointing CCJ judges as a person is questionable, because from the same pool of judges from the various territories who possibly have questions to answer could filter up into the CCJ. And my closing point is, the former Prime Minister is now a junior member, a backbencher. What salary is he getting? Is he getting the Prime Minister's salary, or is he getting a MP salary.
That's a good point.
And the other extension for that, public servants' pension is based on, I think, the last 6 months, right? So if he says that an MP for 2-3 months, what pension is he going to get? I think he might have shot his foot in his foot, but I suspect he think it out properly. Consider that. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I think legally he might only be able to get a MP salary, but I do believe if he retires, essentially he will be getting a Prime Minister's retirement.
Yes, so he will receive an MP salary. He's not even a government minister. And upon his retirement as a former Prime Minister, he will get a Prime Ministerial pension as well. In relation to Vishnu Danpal, the former United Kingdom's High Commissioner, though some people may not want to hear it, for whatever the reason may be, Vishnu Danpal is not responsible for what has transpired.
Yeah.
This is something that I believe the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and the Ministry of National Security and the ministers associated with such are responsible for. The commissioner in Vishnu Danpal, during his time exercising that role, he would have communicated, and I'm certain he would have done all in his power and authority as commissioner to help with the situation, but he certainly would have communicated to the relevant ministers on these particular issues. And I'm almost certain, I can't put my head on a block, but I'm almost certain he would have done that. So in my opinion, Vishnu Danpal bears no responsibility in what has transpired.
The thing is, we don't know for sure that it played out in the United Kingdom in an announcement and the government, our government was taken completely by surprise, right? It could be that Vishnu Danpal, as Keaton said, he got wind of it, he told our government, hey, something may happen, or he might even have enough detail to say what would potentially happen. And then I believe in that case, for the most part, our government can't preemptively, yes, you could argue maybe our government should have tried to preemptively stop it on our end, but to some extent, I don't know if there was any way to do that in the short term. So then, you know, what measure could we have done to effect change in any of those situations attributed to this within 2 to 3 months? This seems like a very hasty reaction by the UK, and I think for our government, it was just, well, we have to wait until they actually do it to see what they actually do, and then we respond to it. You could say the outrage was a little bit artificial, but to some extent, you know, it is what it is, right? Because they have to go through the motions. But yeah, I don't know to what extent, unless this was coming down the pipe for years ago, I don't know to what extent Vishnu Danpal's warning could have helped the situation. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here. Good morning.
Morning. Hello?
Good morning. Yes, you're on the air, caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want you all to clarify something from me. Did the Senate had a sit-in over the weekend or early Monday morning? That is one. Because two, they installed Danpal as the Minister of Finance. Is he a senator?
It's a good point, caller. No, as far as I'm aware, he's not a senator. There has been no Senate sitting. Now,
No,
to give you the exact, in respect to his appointments and legality, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I don't want to share any wrong information with you, but I certainly will get more information on that and share it with you.
Two, the second point is Camille Robinson Regis is the Attorney General. Is the Attorney General the legal advisor to the Cabinet?
Suppose it's
one of their rules, yes.
And legal advisor to the cabinet, and also is supposed to be essentially the defender of Trinidad and Tobago's laws and the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago and the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, to put it in a nutshell.
All right, I'll listen to the comments also.
Thank you, caller. You make a good point. I think I kind of just took it for granted Reginald Amor is going to free up a spot in the Senate. If he's no longer going to serve in cabinet, there's literally no reason for him to be a senator beyond whatever point that is. But legally, it brings up the question, can Vishnu Danpal be sworn in legally? Maybe he was just done, it was ceremonial, and they have not actually named him as minister yet. At this point, I guess you could say I hope that's the case, because if they officially named him as minister without him being a member of parliament, that would be tricky. One more reason why I think the executive and the legislative body should be separate, so we won't have to deal with this unnecessary extra hassle, because at the end of the day, you know, he's there to be a minister before anything else, not to be an MP or a senator or what have you. And senators should be there to be senators, not be there to have a way to backdoor people in so they could be on the cabinet. But Keaton, I don't know if you have anything more to add on that before we go to the Camille.
No, actually, I'm just following along, to be honest with you. I don't have much to add to that.
I mean, what can I say? It is what it is with the post of Attorney General. This is, we're in an interesting and unfortunate situation where there's a lot of criticism for the government, in part because they're a two-term incumbent. There's going to be a lot of criticisms for the people involved. To what extent are there enough members in the PNM slates, at least currently, to hold ministerial portfolios that we won't have questions for? And at the end of the day, what is very, very strange or ironic in this situation is, as much as there are a lot of controversies that are left up in the air, the PNM has managed to position itself where it is perceived to be the more viable option. I'm not saying that they are or they're not, but their perception is better than their competition, at least right now, and maybe for very specific reasons that might not hold through all the way to the election. We have San Fernando in line. I don't know if this is another San Fernando. Good morning. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Sean.
Morning, caller.
Good morning.
So, we have a new Prime Minister. And this morning, the sun still came out. And everything moving as usual in Trinidad and Tobago. So, don't lose sleep over this issue. Please, Sean. Thank you, Keaton, for coming and bringing a voice of calmness to the situation at hand. Now, I just want to see, Mr. Young has any person being thrust into a position that they haven't had before, in terms of you and he is now. This is not anything interim. He is now the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He's the Prime Minister. So he has a new task that he has to take on. I wish him all the luck, because he is governing and I live in. So, you know. Now, the appointments, I looked at the appointments that he made, and I have no reason to suspect anything inferior with the appointments. I actually like the appointment of Mr. Imbut as Minister of Public Utilities, and let me tell you why. A lot of people don't understand Mr. Imbut, you know. You have to first understand Mr. Imbut to understand how he thinks. Mr. Imbut is not a man of empathy. He's a man of, you put him anywhere and he will get the job done because he loves himself. And he loves putting his foot out there. Very bright man, extremely bright man. So where he at public utilities, he will do a good job. Wherever you put Mr. Imbut, he's going to do a good job. Now, you had a caller just asked about the appointment of Mr. Dan Paul. Christine Kangaloo, President, used to be President of the Senate. The law states that she cannot appoint a minister who is not a member of either the House of Representatives or the Senate. So I would suspect that would have taken place behind closed doors over the weekend prior to Mr. Dan Paul being appointed. So we just haven't had information on it. But I don't expect that for them to make a faux pas like that. And Trinidad and Tobago moves on, and we'll see what happens. That is all we can do. We can just see what happens. What I would like to see is Mrs. Prasad Bisesa do the same thing that Dr. Rowley has done. turn a new leaf. Let bring some new people to try and manage the opposition to make a change in the country. You can't keep holding on and holding on. I suspect that they may not have another Stuart Young in the opposition, that they have confidence in that they will put up as leader, because everybody seems to be bowing down to Mr. Prasad Bisesa, except for the crazy five who are opposed in the election there. But leaders have to understand that there's time for change, and I am so proud that Dr. Rowley, although he's not my favorite person there, but he saw he had enough maturity to just walk, not wait like how other leaders do. A lot of them in the Caribbean, that they just hold on and you have to vote them out. When your time comes, just walk and let somebody else you take the reins. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. I'll just say this on Dr. Rowley. When he had that interview there with the three media houses and he was responding with regards to his health and with regards to the decisions that he made when in 2020 he decided to go back in because there was a pandemic and his family didn't necessarily appreciate that. And maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm naive, but I felt as though it was a genuine moment. When you're speaking off the cuff like that and freely, it's harder to put on an act. You know, I'm sure cynics will think that it is, but I believe him there, and that's one of the reasons why I think, you know, he as a man says, right, I am past my time, you know, I don't fault him at all for wanting to retire and leave all this behind, for better or worse. It is what it is. Politics is not a nice business. Now, the thing is, with regards to Kamala Prasad Bisesa, to some extent, I am starting to wonder, would the other senior members of the UNC want to see her retire? Because to some extent, their position is tied to her being there. And you can't just put, you know, Stuart Young is a relatively new person. So you give people the dream of he will be different, as opposed to a very long-standing member of the PNM. If you take a very long-standing senior person of the UNC to replace Kamala, I don't think you see the benefits. If you put someone new, someone relatively new to the game, some of these senior people, they might be looking at their positions and they don't want to risk it. So they're invested in Kamala. They're committed to that. And they don't want to see change. And that's what I fear might be going on in the UNC.
I think, to be honest with you, in respect to the United National Congress, I go back to what I previously stated, that they have an ideal opportunity. I mean, quite frankly, it's not too late. And, you know, surprise us. Let it be different to what we expect or from what we are seeing. The thing is, the United National Congress has it all to play for now. You know, they've seen the hands of the People's National Movement. They've seen the hand of Stuart Young in these appointments. What can they do differently? Now, I agree with the caller from San Fernando in respect to the one thing that I really, really respect Dr. Rowley over, and which I think he has certainly gone a step above the opposition leader, is knowing when to leave. He has served his 2 terms. That's it. And he has exited this role. You can be happy, you can be unhappy about it. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change the exchange rate, right? At the end of the day, the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, is no longer there, and he's made that decision on his own accord. For whatever the reason may be, he's made that decision. And kudos to him on that part. Listen, part of being a leader is knowing when your time is up and it's time to fostering new leadership, right? So, kudos to Dr. Rowley on that part. I've said it previously, I repeat it again. I agree with the caller from San Fernando on that. In respect to the United National Congress, I think there's so much infighting in the UNC for exactly who should be political leader. But the thing is, with the opposition leader, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, being there, I think, Sean, the individuals, those same individuals who stood on a platform and really went after their colleagues, who didn't challenge the leadership of Kamala Prasad Bisesa, but challenged the executive of whom she endorsed, those same individuals would probably lose not just their positions in the party, but having Kamala Prasad Bisesa there suggests that they have more power and influence. I think they have a lot of control over the opposition leader. I could be very wrong.
Right.
And I like to be proven wrong. But I think they have a lot of control over Kamala Persaud-Bissessar, that it suits them best for having her there. Now, I'm not saying she's nobody's fool. She's still a brilliant individual. But let us see how much she can maneuver the situation as a leader. This is where it's going to test her leadership skills and her qualities. She hasn't proven anything different thus far. She hasn't given me anything to be hopeful of. But what I am hopeful is that there is still time for them to do different. And let's see that happens.
Keaton, one term in opposition was all that it took for Dr. Keith Rowley to overtake Kamala Persaud-Bissessar. Of course, the Vote Kamala re-election campaign for the coalition was probably ill-advised. But I'll just say this, they've had 2 terms in opposition, Keaton. They've had many opportunities to essentially lap what should be, because it's an administration for 2 terms. There's a lot of things that will make them unpopular, no matter how good any government is. That's just the nature of the game. You are the incumbent, you are supposed to be disadvantaged. They have been in opposition for 2 terms. Now they are supposed to have the advantage. They have had opportunities. I don't think they have ever capitalized on the opportunities, Keaton, and that's what frustrates me. And that's what makes statements like a bloodless coup. Again, I ask the question, how does the government usurp itself? If this is the level of strategy you have at this point in time, in year number 10, really and truly, what are we doing? Because at the end of the day, the PNM is allowed to get away with certain things because the opposition is too weak and it's par for the course. All of the opportunities of the last 10 years potentially have gone squandered. There have been many. Why I can't have confidence that they will be able to grasp this one with any significant amount of decisiveness.
It also speaks to the strength of Dr. Rowley and by extension the People's National Movement in opposition. If the United National Congress were to win the general elections, the PNM's machinery is a very powerful machinery and should not be undermined by any means at all. So good luck to any party who wins the election if the People's National Movement is in opposition. Listen, the situation that we find ourselves in, I can blame the opposition leader. I will not. It's the government, it's the cabinet, it's what they've done over the last 10 years. Where I will fall to the opposition, and it's in agreeing with what you've indicated, they've had it laid on a platter for them. It's been laid out on a platter for them. It's all there for them to take. It's all there for them to see. I mean, we've been critical of the government. And actually we've been fair when it comes to our criticism. I don't think we criticize unnecessarily, but again, that's other people will have their opinion. The opposition really need to step up their game. And I'm even wondering who's the public relations officer of the United National Congress right now. On paper, it's Dr. Kirk Mew. I'm wondering if it's Philip Edward Alexander. But who knows?
Yeah, it seems as though they've changed their MO. Which again, to one where it makes me question exactly what is their strategy, what is their goal, how are things going to happen?
As we started, ignorance is bliss. You find those pockets of ignorance that exist in society, it's still there, and you exploit it. And you instigate a lot of fear, and you swoop in as the only savior and protector, and that is what's happening right now.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, right? There's a quote in a movie that basically says, you know, the other guy, they can't tell you how to fix it. They can only tell you who's to blame for it and how to be afraid of it. And I wonder if the UNC is falling for that trap of going too far into that and not into a more constructive mode, or at least not necessarily that that's where they are, but that's what they might be perceived to be by the undecided voters in the middle, assuming we have undecided voters in the middle who will actually come out to vote. That's a whole other topic for another day, so I won't necessarily get into that, Keaton.
Well, just remember, ignorance and chaos can be a politician's best friend. And It certainly seems to be that way.
As
we speak.
Isn't there more chaos within the UNC to some extent right now than within any other political situation? I don't know if that's their best friend. Granted, it's not as though everything in PNM is
ignorance and chaos
solid.
Can be a politician's best friend. Depends on how you are as a politician, how strategic and how intelligent you are as a politician.
Well, all right. So we have to close up the show here, trying to end a little bit more on time than usual. But with that said, the PNM has essentially passed the first test, the first hurdle with regards to the succession of Dr. Heath Rowley and the successor in Stuart Young taking up the mantle of leadership, because one of the things that we wondered is, will their arrangements hold out the moment Prime Minister Rowley steps down? Technically, he no longer has that certain amount of authority to enforce his decisions. It seems as though the PNM has managed to maintain its unity despite the potentials for dissenting opinions on the matter. And now we have to wait and see exactly how the internal leadership change alongside the general election will play out. With that said, thanks to the callers. Keaton, thanks for joining me. I will just end my remarks with basically reminding people that it's nice to be nice. Remember your allegiance to each other and to this republic. Mr. Shah, close out the show.
Well, it's good to be back on this platform after, about 5 to 6 weeks away. But it's good to be here, and I think you might be seeing a bit more of me now that I am no longer the host of AM Prime. So I am back here on Talking Points. Sure, Michael Small, today is a good day to have a good day, and hopefully a great week ahead. So we'll see how things go.
All right, folks, stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services,